America is the target now. A man named Robert Pape spent 25 years building the database the FBI uses to find the next attacker. In February, we bombed Iran. The White House called it a clean win. Pape says it backfired.
That Iran is stronger today than it was before the war started on February 28th. Literally threatening ground occupation. That's the biggest risk factor for suicide terrorism in my 25 years of studying suicide attacks.
So the attack he fears isn't over there.
A mass casualty attack against American troops or American civilians.
Not Tehran. Here. For 20 years, one analyst has run the same model of what happens when America bombs Iran. He's briefed administrations of both parties for 2 decades, and month after month, the model has kept coming true. Now, it's pointing somewhere new. Not at Tehran, at us. This war didn't surprise him for a second.
I've been modeling the bombing of Iran for 20 years. Iran is stronger today than it was before the war started on February 28th. And that's because it controls the Strait of Hormuz, meaning that it can threaten at will virtually any ship that goes through the Strait of Hormuz. It's demonstrated this over and over and over again. Even when the ships turn off their transponders, they are still able to threaten ships as they go through. And every time a ship tries to run the gauntlet, they run into a drone, mine, they run into basically Iran's barrier. And that is Iran's power.
One country holding the most powerful navy on Earth out of a single stretch of water. How is that even possible?
Iran entered this war with thousands, we think tens of thousands of drones, ballistic missiles, anti-shipping missiles, which are lower sea-skimming cruise missiles. And even though we have destroyed large fractions of their missiles, they have plenty left over to hit these targets because they're doing saturation attacks. They're essentially doing swarms. They're saturating our defensive capability, and the drones and missiles that get through, plenty enough to damage it to the point we can barely use it if at all.
But the missiles are only half of it. The other half has nothing to do with weapons and everything to do with fear. The men who actually move the world's oil have started saying no.
So Stephen, just to explain to your audience, because they're trying to figure out how are we getting here, this is what the 20 years of modeling was really showing. We would very quickly get to this fork in the road. It wouldn't take months and months. It would happen right away. And President Trump has been trying to avoid the escalation trap. This is called an escalation trap. And he's been trying to avoid that trap. He tried to avoid it with bombing for 6 weeks. He tried to avoid it with the blockade. He tried signing the MOU. He let J.D. Vance offer money, and that none of those were actually working. And where he is now is still at this fork in the road, the dilemma of the escalation trap. Either he owns the loss, which it means everything you just said, and becomes known as the president who allowed not just the Strait of Hormuz to be controlled, but set a precedent for other countries and other non-state actors to control their choke points. Or we have we take it back physically. Are we going to physically take it back?
Every exit from that trap has already been tried. Bombing, a blockade, a signed memo, even cash. None of it held. And when Pape describes where that leaves us, he doesn't reach for a chart. He reaches for a ship.
The world is like, we're like on the Titanic, and we're about to hit the iceberg. And maybe that iceberg moved a little bit further away, but we're still right on the trajectory to hit that iceberg, and it's coming. And when the iceberg hits, there's not enough lifeboats for everybody.
That's the metaphor. Here's the number. The one scenario every American is told is off the table: US troops on Iranian soil. He puts the odds higher than anyone wants to admit.
Well over 50%. I think it's bordering on 70% now. And the reasons are that Number one, the economic crisis that President Trump was trying to prevent, and therefore the economic costs that will hurt him later, is already starting to become baked in. What you're hearing this morning with the Houthis closing the pipeline area around Yanbu, it's called, this port city in the Red Sea, where the 4 to 5 million barrels of Saudi oil is coming out. What that is going to do is make the economic crisis even more baked in, even more likely, unless it's immediately reversed. And even if it was immediately reversed tomorrow, that could be reversed again the next day after that. This is starting to spiral out of control because it's not just up to President Trump now to put this genie back in the bottle. President Trump can actually still can withdraw, but right now Iran has to stop the escalation. It has to let the Red Sea oil flow. It has to allow ships to flow from Hormuz. And Iran is in a mood for revenge. Iran there's emotions coursing through Iran, but it's not causing Iran to pull back. It's causing Iran to want revenge. And the Supreme Leader's statement just of a couple days ago, this was Saturday, 2 U.S. soldiers were tragically killed in Jordan.
This isn't only Trump's decision anymore. Over the weekend, 2 American soldiers were killed at a base in Jordan, and Iran's Supreme Leader, very much alive, answered in his own words.
What the Supreme Leader did was use the phrase that he's going to deliver unforgettable lessons to America. Unforgettable lessons is the exact phrase by the Supreme Leader over the weekend. What you are seeing here, Stephen, is as Iran started to shoot at ships here to try to reinforce the MOU, President Trump upped the ante. Now we're in our ninth day of bombing in a row. Now Iran is upping the ante. And Iran is upping the ante in multiple ways. It's attacking our base in Jordan, which it only rarely done since March, actually. It's now, with the Houthis, closing the Red Sea. And we haven't yet talked about Kuwait, and we should talk about what happened here over the weekend here in Kuwait, because this is a harbinger of what's to come, because it shows how ferocious the anger is by Iran and how hard it's going to be to stop this spiral of escalation.
A spiral that neither side is now steering. So when Pape looks at the next few weeks, what is the specific thing he's bracing for?
A mass casualty attack against American troops or American civilians. Against American troops in the Middle East, but I'm specifically worrying about a barrage of ballistic missiles against our naval ships in the Gulf of Oman.
Not a stray consequence of the war, the most predictable one. Because of the single move, Pape says, is the biggest trigger of all.
Because we are now literally threatening ground occupation. That's the biggest risk factor for suicide terrorism in my 25 years of studying suicide attacks.
And he can already see the shape it would take. Not on a battlefield, but in the places Americans live and travel.
This could be against an American airliner. It could be against, Americans on a commercial airliner. This could be against Americans, say businessmen in Aqaba. So you might know there have been attacks recently in Aqaba, which is this really lovely resort town. I've never been there. And the fact is, there are American businessmen moving all around the Middle East now to build these pipelines. And so I can imagine there being terrorist attacks against the hotels they're staying at. The German and British embassies have just ordered their evacuation. State Department has issued an advisory over the weekend for Americans to start leaving the region. But I'm concerned about terrorist attack because threatening or actually doing ground control, controlling pieces of homeland territory, is the biggest risk factor for suicide terrorism.
How can he put a probability on a suicide attack that hasn't happened yet? Because more than 20 years ago, he built the database that answers exactly that.
It wasn't just a terrorist attack, so I started to collect what became the first complete data set of all suicide attacks around the world. I did this at the University of Chicago. I did this with a few research assistants, basically work-study students. The suicide terrorism, the reason I studied it, Stephen, was because it's the lung cancer of terrorism. Suicide attacks kill more people in the category of terrorism than all the other different kinds of terrorism combined. The suicide attacks are the biggest killer. It's like lung cancer. We have other kinds of cancers, but lung cancer is the biggest killer. And what is the key risk factor for the lung cancer of suicide terrorism? It's military combat presence on territory the terrorists prize.
The model briefed to the White House for 20 years, the database that mapped every suicide attack on Earth. Both are pointing at the same page now, and for the first time in 20 years, that page isn't about a war over there. It's about home soil.